It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the USA Rugby player, Abby Gustaitis. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to play professional rugby?
So I started playing club rugby at the University of Maryland, and I didn't know there was a national team until 2013, which was my senior year of college. And so at that point, I started looking into it and I started watching all of their matches, and it's like, whoa, that's pretty cool. And then I continued to play and pursue the sport. I just fell in love with it and I wanted to do it as much as possible. And I was lucky enough to get that opportunity to come out to San Diego in 2015. And I don't regret it at all. Very grateful for the choices I made and the opportunities.
Of course, what was your playing time at Maryland?
It was very social. So it wasn't that serious. We were pretty good my freshman and sophomore year, and we competed in nationals. We didn't quite make it to the top, but we trained twice a week out on the frat road, just on basically a bit of grass. And then we played on Saturdays. And at the end, I was pretty much a player coach. We didn't have a coach my senior year. So I'm trying to coach my team and myself. And meanwhile, I still didn't know that much about rugby. So casual would be putting it lightly.
What was it like being the coach and like trying to coach yourself at the same time?
That was a little more difficult than I anticipated. I thought, oh, I can do this. I know rugby. And then I realized I didn't. I'd only played the sport for 3 years at that point, and it's very complicated, in case you couldn't tell that. But I think I did okay, but I wouldn't say it was my best role to date. I wanted to improve my own play still while trying to get scouted by the national team. And so it was difficult to prioritize.
What was a typical game day like playing for Maryland?
Not exactly what you would expect of a college level sports team. It was very casual. So we would just rock up in the morning, and when we had a coach, it was nice. They would, we would just go through your normal warm up, and then you just hop on the field and play. And the best thing about rugby is that you socialize with the team that you just competed against. And so after every match, the two teams would have food and chat and get to know one another. And that's just that community that rugby builds.
Can you talk about, of course, putting on that Maryland jersey for the first time and what that was like?
That was pretty cool. I don't know if you know much about Maryland, but we are diehards for our flag. And so our uniforms also had the Maryland flag on them. And I've always been proud to be from Maryland. And so that was really cool to get to do that. And just to play a sport that I really loved and, enjoyed the company of those around me.
What was it like competing in the 2017 and 2018 Rugby World Series Cup?
Oh, the World Cups. Yeah. So the first one was the 15s World Cup in Ireland. And that was my first time really playing with the 15-a-side team. And it was a growing experience. Like, we weren't ranked that high going into it, but we were really hopeful and excited to compete. And we got to travel around Ireland for a month. And then we ended up finishing fourth, but making it to the semifinals was our goal initially, and we got to achieve that. Unfortunately, we didn't get the win after, But the same with San Francisco, we also made it to the semifinals, and that was on home field in Northern California. So it was really amazing to have friends and family out there to come and support you. And anytime you get to play in front of your supporters is just the best feeling. That's one of my favorite moments of competing in sport, was walking around the stadium after San Francisco World Cup and seeing my family and friends. And it was really emotional, but I loved it. And that will stay with me forever.
What was the process like for you to get scouted on the U.S. national team of rugby?
It's a little complicated. The rugby pathway is not so black and white. They have tournaments where you play 7s or 15s, and you just kind of have to like pay as you want to go to tournaments. So like I would fund myself to go travel and play rugby, and in the hopes of being seen by a national team scout. And I ended up meeting the head coach of the national team at the time in Las Vegas at a tournament. And that was when he invited me to come train at the Olympic Training Center.
What was that feeling like whenever he invited you to come train and you were like, okay, I can do this professionally?
It was surreal. That had been my goal for the last year. I was working towards competing with the 7s team and going out there. And then when I got the offer, I was still in a little bit of shock, and I decided to uproot myself from Maryland and go move to Southern California. And I'm still here 6 years later. So apparently I made the right call, because I love it here, but I also love rugby.
What was that transition like for you, for just going up and be like, okay, I'm going to leave Maryland, go to LA, achieve my dreams to be in the Olympics?
Well, it wasn't that easy, I'll be honest. It was quite complex, but I had a full-time job, a 9-to-5 job, and I played rugby in the evenings. I worked out in the mornings. So it was very regimented. And then moving out to California, it was really taxing physically, mentally, emotionally, but it was worth the roller coaster. And I learned a lot along the way, but like I said, not so easy.
Of course, as playing as a professional, of course, being in the Olympics and stuff, do you still have to have other jobs, like your 9-to-5 job along with playing rugby? Or is rugby your only job?
So we train full time, so you wouldn't be able to have another full-time job, but a lot of the girls, they will have part-time jobs, or they're pursuing other paths that will help them after they finish playing rugby. Like myself, I'm a Pilates instructor. So I teach Pilates in the evenings or on the weekends when we're not training. And that's partially because I love it, but also it helps to supplement my income.
Of course, what is that like to balance, of course, being a Pilates instructor and also being a professional rugby player?
Takes a bit of time management for sure, but it's something I enjoy doing. So I don't feel like either are a burden on me. And I find benefits in both and just practicing Pilates has really helped me as an athlete as well. And yeah.
Of course, what was the process like of going to the Olympics in Tokyo and competing for the country?
It was a long process. After the postponement of the Olympics in 2020, there were so many unknowns, and we didn't know when we were going to get to play again, if the Olympics were going to happen, what the atmosphere will even be like. And so the fact that Japan went on and put the Olympics on was incredible. And the hospitality that all the volunteers and workers showed was second to none. I'm so grateful for that. And although there weren't fans there, we all felt like the outpouring of support from home, and we saw the watch parties and the messages, and it was incredible to get to play in the Olympics, which is the biggest stage. You grow up watching those, and it still feels weird that I get to say I competed in the Olympics.
What was that feeling like of putting on the jersey and having the Olympic rings on your shirt and be like, okay, I'm in the Olympics. I've watched the Olympics, let's say, all my life. I'm here. Let's make it happen.
I was actually crying before we even went onto the field. I was just so overwhelmed with emotion and gratitude and pride, and so humbled, and to see all of the fight and the work that rugby players before me, especially the women, had gone through for me to have that opportunity. Just so grateful for that path, and just proud to represent my family and friends on the world stage, and obviously get to compete. I love playing rugby, and I love the girls that I play with. So it's just a joy.
Of course, can you talk about how different this past year of playing in the Olympics was versus, like, let's say if you played in the last 4 years?
Apart from the no fans and wearing a mask, which I think we're all used to at this point anyway, it didn't seem too different. All the competitions were the same. There's still medals up for grabs. The village was a really cool experience. You still got to interact with other athletes and trade pins for your lanyard. And apart from the fans, I would say that was the main difference. But I almost feel like that heightened the support from back home.
What was that feeling like of trading lanyards and like pins with like people like, let's say, in Japan, Tokoyo, and other countries like that you would have probably never have visited?
Right, super cool. And so you got to learn about other athletes and where they were from, what they competed in, and hear a little bit about their journey, and get to swap pins. I mean, it's a long-standing Olympic tradition, and I was a little skeptical that they were going to allow that. So it was really cool to get to be a part of that.
Were there any players in the Olympics that you were like, okay, I've grown up watching you like compete, and now I'm here competing against you?
Well, some of the rugby girls, once I found rugby and I watched their matches, like I have seen them play thousands of times just from watching them, and now I get to compete against them. So that's cool. But then you have people like Allyson Felix, who I've watched in the Olympics for years and years, and to see her in the village, that was a really cool experience.
What was that feeling like knowing that, okay, I've seen you play, like I'm right beside you, and you're not trying to be like fangirl, but you're like, okay, I've seen you play?
I think we get to compete against these nations a lot in our World Series throughout the year. So we didn't really come across a team that we hadn't played before. So I think that was reassuring a little bit, but also it's sevens. So it's a crazy sport where on any given day, any team can beat anyone. But I think for me, it just comes back to like work ethic and knowing, oh, you only found this sport however long ago, and then just working your way up to compete against those people that you watched.
What was a typical game day like for you?
Very long. We would get up at maybe like 5:30 in the morning, and then we'd have our primer outside the hotel. So basically where you just get activated, you do a little stretching, passing, running, wake the body up. And then we'd go to breakfast and then head to the field, and we'd play our first game at about 10 a.m. So we'd have our warm up, pull the jerseys on, go out and play. And that's only 14 minutes. But then in between games, there were about 5 to 6 hours. So we would, after you ate, and we would recap the game, watch it, and then everyone kind of like took a nap. So everyone was just laying on the floor in like sleeping bags or covered in towels, and lights were off for a few hours. And then we would start to like wake back up and have another meal. And then we'd play our second game around 5 or 6. And again, that's that same process. You have a warm up, you preview the game and your opponent, and then play the game. And then after that, it was just recovery. And then we would recap the day and then plan for the next day and try to have dinner before like 9 p.m. And then there we were off to sleep and to do it again for the next 2 days.
Of course, what was that like competing twice in one day? And whenever you competed twice in one day, were you playing the same team or were you playing like 2 different teams?
It's 2 different teams. So we normally play 3 games in a day when we prep for the Olympics in our World Series. And so this, for the Olympics, the tournament spans 3 days. So you only play 2 games each day. It's a long time in between games. So you kind of have to like turn off and not think about rugby at all. Just try to relax. And you're playing, your pool play is first. So your first 3 games, the first day, and then the first game of the second day, that's your pool. And then after that, that determines who you play in the quarterfinals. And then after that is the semis. So you play 2 different teams, and it's all about compartmentalizing the rugby bit when you don't need to be thinking about it.
What is some of your game day rituals that you have?
For me, my probably only game day ritual is just writing in my notebook. And so I usually write down the kickoff formation that we're going to do. And that tells me who is going to be on the field with me. And then below that, I write down my strengths, like usually 2 or 3 of what I know I'm good at and what I bring to the team. And then I can go back and revisit those to make sure that I hit those or I was able to do the things that I said I would.
What were some of your favorite moments and memories, of course, playing the Olympics in the village?
I think just playing rugby at that level, that was the best part for me, was getting to pull on that jersey and go out there. But also the opening ceremony was really incredible. It was a long day, but just to be in with all the other USA athletes, that was a really exciting evening. And, Americans, they love to get the USA chants going. So we did a little chant off with the French, and that was pretty memorable.
What advice would you give college rugby players looking to play professional and college rugby?
I think just to keep playing. A lot of times you think, oh, maybe rugby is just like a social sport, or it's fun during college, and I don't know if there's anything for me after. But if you just keep playing rugby in all forms of it, whether it's 7s, 15s, touch, league, there's no wrong with getting that ball in your hands and just exposing yourself to as much rugby as possible to strengthen your rugby IQ.
What advice would you give professional rugby players looking to play in the Olympics, whether it's their first time or multiple times playing?
For me, it was about just enjoying the moments without all of the expectations put on your performance. And if you're able to soak up that in the build-up to your competition, I think you would leave the Olympics with a positive experience.
That's wonderful advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
Instagram at atown1022, my college nickname, and then on Twitter at Abby Gustaitis.
Thank you again, Abby Gustaitis, for your interview, and best of luck in your future with the U.S. Rugby.
Thanks, Brandon.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Abby, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media, and on YouTube.